Chapter 4, Mishnah 1. A wooden utensil that can hold 40 se'ah or more is too big to become tame. For this reason, a very large wooden cabinet or chest cannot become tame. Since the cabinet or chest does not become tame, if its doors are closed, tuma cannot enter inside of it. Our chapter discusses the laws of tumas ohel that apply to a large wooden cabinet. The Mishnah begins by discussing a cabinet with thick walls. The walls have holes in them that are less than a tefach square. The holes run through the entire thickness of the cabinet's walls. Thus, the hole opens at one end to the inside of the cabinet and at the other end to the outside of the cabinet. Needles and other small items were sometimes stored in these holes. We now turn to the words of the Mishnah. If a cabinet is standing outside in the open air and not under any roof, and there is tuma, a piece of corpse, inside the cabinet, the utensils that are in the thickness of its walls are tahor, because the holes are considered a separate area from the inside of the cabinet. Similarly, if there is tuma in the thickness of its walls, i.e. the holes, the utensils inside the cabinet are tahor because the holes are considered a separate area from inside the cabinet. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi says half the hole is considered to be inside the cabinet and half the hole is considered to be outside of it. The previous case of the Mishnah discussed a cabinet standing outside a house in an open area. The next case of the Mishnah discusses a cabinet standing inside a house. If the cabinet is standing inside a house, the law is as follows. If the tuma, e.g. a piece of corpse, is inside the cabinet, the utensils in the house become tame, even if the doors of the cabinet are closed, because the tuma spreads from the cabinet into the house for the reason the Mishnah will give below. But if the tuma is in the house, whatever is inside the cabinet remains tahor, as long as the cabinet doors are closed, because the cabinet blocks the tuma from entering it. This is because it is the way of tuma to exit from the cabinet into the house, but it is not the way of tuma to enter from the house into the cabinet. Since the piece of corpse inside the cabinet will eventually be removed from the cabinet and carried out through the house, its tuma goes out from the cabinet into the house immediately. The walls of the cabinet cannot block it, but there is no reason for the piece of corpse in the house to be brought into the cabinet. Therefore, the tuma in the house does not enter the cabinet as long as the cabinet's doors are closed. The Mishnah now discusses the law in a case where neither the utensils nor the tuma are inside the cabinet, but the cabinet forms a barrier between them. If the cabinet is standing in a house and there are utensils underneath it between the cabinet and the ground, or behind it between the cabinet and the wall of the house, or on top of it between the cabinet and the ceiling beams, and there is tuma in the house, the law is as follows. If there is a space a tefach wide by a tefach high in the gap between the cabinet and the ground, or the cabinet and the wall or ceiling, the utensils are tame. Since there is an opening of a tefach square between the gap and the house, the tuma in the house spreads through that opening into the gap and makes the utensils in it tame. But if not, i.e. if the gap between the cabinet and the floor, wall, or ceiling is less than a tefach high by a tefach wide, the tuma does not spread into the gap, and the utensils inside remain tahor. Corpse tuma does not spread through an opening less than a tefach square. A different rule applies when the utensils are in the house and the tuma is in the gap underneath, above, or behind the cabinet. However, if the tuma is there in the gap between the cabinet and the floor, wall, or ceiling, then the utensils in the house become tame in all cases, even if the space is less than a tefach.